Well, it's my great pleasure today to welcome Aki Kubo, the CEO of TAG here in Japan. He's an old friend of mine, and I'm very interested to get his views on leadership, as this is one of Japan's top business interviews. So welcome, Kubo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so let's begin. Tell us a little bit about your background, your work experience. A lot of people may not know the company, TAG, or what you've done. Right. So let's flesh it out a little bit.
Okay. I joined McCann Erickson, McCann Erickson Hakodo. It was a joint venture. 49% of the company was owned by Hakodo, the second largest advertising firm. So I started my career at McCann, and then Weber Shandwick, then Ogilvy Mather, then now TAG. So throughout my career, I have never worked for a Japanese company. So all the time, either in Japan or anywhere else, but I never worked for Japanese company. I did have Japanese company as my client, but I myself never be employed by a Japanese company. So that is my career for 4 years, for more than 3 decades to date. Talking about my company, TAG is actually a kind of unique marketing execution agency, if you will. So we are similar to traditional advertising agency, but we are focused on marketing execution. So we do not do any kind of intangible brand building type of things, but we do focus our service onto a very tangible marketing operation offerings, which gives the immediate impact to your bottom lines for this year. So that's the TAG is about.
What will be an example of that practical application?
So, the marketing people at marketing companies, whoever they are very busy, and they work day and night, and sometimes they have to bring back their PCs at home and work during the weekend. But if you close look at why they are so busy, there are many things that they have to do, which is not really a core things for you as a marketers. Many operation jobs such as reporting, negotiations, project management, and cost control, all these kind of things. So our operators on site take over all these operation job, by which you as the marketer can really focus on what's really matter for you as the marketers, such as brand building or omni-channel strategy, and all these core things. Why? Because we take over all these non-core things. That is our business model.
Okay. And what caused you to choose McCann Erickson as your first employer?
Well, actually, to be honest, I have applied several companies, but McCann is the almost the only one company who chose me. So I have no choice. But I must say I was very fortunate that I could start my career at McCann. It is a great agency and still love it. And I often think that if I started my career in a Japanese company, I could have spent very different careers today. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have worked out quite differently. And if we think about leadership in Japan, I mean, you're working in foreign multinational companies in Japan.
And abroad as well.
Oh, okay. Where did you work abroad?
So my first, so I worked abroad twice and studied abroad twice. So first location was actually Amsterdam, Holland. That was in my early 30s. So my job, that was my McCann time, and my client was actually Canon. So they have big European headquarters outside Amsterdam called Amsterdam. That is where my client is located, and they have many Japanese expats there. And McCann office in Amsterdam has some challenges in terms of communication, so they asked somebody to come and help them to facilitate communication. So that was my first assignment, and that was kind of pan-European campaign coordination. So it was a very, very interesting experience that I have.
And where else were you posted overseas?
And later on, toward the end of my career at McCann, I was executive vice president for McCann in London, and global account director for one of the multinational clients. So actually my family lived in London, but I lived in airplane type of situations, so I travel all the time. But again, that was a very good experience, to be honest.
Wow, fascinating. And I'm sure both when you're working in Europe and working in Japan, working in gaishke companies, multinational companies, but with Japanese clients, you got to see a lot of contrast between leadership styles of Japan and foreign countries.
Right.
When you moved from Japan to the Netherlands, you started working in that environment. What were the sort of things you noticed about the leadership differences between how they were working in Europe and how you used to working in Japan?
So I would think the couple significant differences in terms of the leadership in Japan, and I would say the rest of the world. I mean, in West in particular. So we often said the leaders are different from managers. But actually, many of the leaders in Japanese companies are not really leaders, but they are more managers. So managers are expected to manage, but they are not particularly expected to lead the change. That, I think, is the fundamental difference. And often the leaders in Japanese organization comes from the organization, as opposed to a new leader in the West comes often from outside. So naturally, they have no bias, whereas the in-house leaders have many, bias or sontaku, whatever you call it. So that, I think, is the very different.
And sontaku there means anticipating what other people want and creating that situation.
Yeah, and tries to cope with the hidden agenda, if you will. That's what sontaku is about.
So the question for a lot of people would be, okay, if all of these managers are managing in Japan, who's doing the leading? Where's the leading getting done?
So therefore, the one of the challenges of these countries, among many challenges that this country is confronting with, the slow progress, and it takes time to make the decisions, and therefore we are facing low productivities and very. So if we, some of the leading Japanese companies have been recently bought by Chinese. Then they are now coming back and regaining the momentum and growing again. And if you close look at why this, the change is happening, and it often comes from the change of the leadership. Chinese business person, Chinese leaders, makes much quicker decisions than traditional Japanese consensus-driven, decision-making process. I think that is the things. So that is fundamental challenge of this country, I guess.
And did you find, therefore, that in Europe, or some of the companies you worked in, where you've got non-Japanese leaders, that they are much more quick in decision-making, more dynamic, more aggressive, maybe? I don't know. What did you find?
So this is actually my belief that the Japanese companies in Europe and also Japanese companies in headquarters in Japan need more outside leaders. So we need more aliens, actually. We need more foreigners who is free from all this bias, and they are hired as a change agent as opposed to continue what has been done over the years. So it's really the time for us to think about what the new leader is about.
And when you talk about those biases that Japanese managers will have that maybe a foreign import wouldn't have, what would those biases include?
So, the people here do not appreciate radical change, as we all know. So, often your direct reports appreciate kind of status quo and slow changes, as opposed to radical, step change. So if you are fully aware of what your direct report wants, that is naturally a bias that you have to appreciate. And you come from the organizations, you have been working with your colleagues over the years. So you really understand what kind of values that company has and what kind of, the corporate culture and DNA, if you will. So we need a leader who is free from all these bias. That I think is the best for an organization.
And given your exposure to different ways of leading,
Yeah.
and particularly you're working for a foreign multinational company, you as a leader, how have you approached leadership?
So, I joined, actually TAG is my fourth company as MD. So I was MD of McCann International and MD or CEO of Weber Shandwick and country head for Ogilvy Major and now managing director for TAG. So of the four companies, three of them I joined the company as the top of the organizations. Right? At McCann, I started my career from the junior. So I was not free from all these bias. But other than that, other three companies, Weber Shandwick, Ogilvy Mather, and now TAG, I joined the company as the top of the organization from outside. So what I did is actually a couple of things. One of which is upfront, I make it very clear what I want to do, and what's the game plan that I have, and also I tried to achieve some early victory, if you will, to demonstrate that the new leader is really the leader, as opposed to just the new guy coming in. You see what I mean? So
have some credibility with the team.
that I think is very important because even in Gaishike company in Japan, the people sort of expect new leaders come from the organization as opposed to bring in somebody from outside. That's the nature of Japanese, the people. So therefore, it is very important that why you are appointed as the new leader as opposed to somebody from inside. That I think is very important as a new leader.
And it must be quite difficult, not just in Japan, but anywhere where you come from outside.
Yeah.
There are people inside who probably think they should be the leader.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you turn up. So
Yeah.
I'm imagining that's rather a tricky balance to get these people to follow you who actually think they should be sitting in your chair.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you cannot get everybody's buy-in from day one naturally. So you need to identify who, say, out of, 10 direct reports that you have, try to identify 2 or 3 who might appreciate you as a leaders. Then they will once you get the buy-in from these the limited but very powerful the people who are willing to work with you, then you leverage their intelligence and insight to materialize what you want to materialize, I think.
In the case of foreign multinational companies, sometimes when presidents are brought in with a change agenda and there are a lot of vested interests inside the company, they don't have any of that.
Yeah.
They try to sabotage
Yeah.
the new leader. They'll go directly to the headquarters and say, this new guy doesn't know Japan,
Yeah.
doesn't know the clients, doesn't know the market, he's doing this, he's doing that. It's usually a he, complaining all the time, creating trouble.
Right.
What about in the Japanese version? Because, you're mainly dealing with Japanese staff here, but as a Japanese person, did you ever get those sorts of occasions where people are trying to undercut you?
Yes, that is always the risk, I must say, and I myself has experienced kind of similar situation, to be honest. You, as a newcomer from outside, you should be aware that you are perceived as an alien.
Even though you're Japanese.
Even I'm, local talent, but the leader or country head for multinational companies in Japan, I believe, has a very strong role as an interface. So headquarters either in New York or London or wherever really do not understand what's going on in market, in particular the marketplace like Japan. But at the same time, many of your teams, local team, do not understand what the global agenda is about. So you, as an interface, have to act as an interface, and you are supposed to tell what's going on in Japan to your headquarters and get their concurrence. At the same time, you will let your people knows what the global agenda is about and why global strategy is moving to this direction as opposed to that directions. So that is a very important role, and probably this is kind of probably more important than any other market, I think. Yeah, because of the unique homogeneous society of the country.
And those efforts to push back, often they include some dirty tricks get played.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be any rules. All the rule book is out the window. Anything goes, because people feel threatened
Right.
by their change and what they want to do. Did you have such experiences too?
Some, but not that serious, to be honest. But the again, only thing that you can do is to demonstrate why you are here and why you are appointed. And as you pointed out, you have to demonstrate your capabilities and gain the credit from your team as well as from your headquarters. I think that is very important things.
And of course you have direct reports, but there's also people down the bottom too. So
Yeah.
one of the issues of leadership is that we may set the course for the organisation, we may believe that we're communicating the changes throughout the organisation, through our direct reports. But as you mentioned before, with managers, often they're like a concrete layer, they absorb all the knowledge and information from above, but they don't like to pass it down.
Yeah, yes.
I don't know whether to keep power or whatever reason, but they don't tend to pass it down to the people at the bottom. So often we think at the top, everyone knows why we're doing this, everyone knows the importance of this, but sometimes they don't know because they're not being told. What has been your experience with this issue?
So yes, that is sometimes happening. Therefore, I think it's important that you should have direct contact with the one or two level below. If you speak only to your direct reports, you might fall into that sort of trap that you just described. So it is important you have to have the one or two level below. Then you can check what your strategy is well penetrated and conveyed to within the organization. I think that is important. I have regular town hall meetings at TAG, and at Ogilvy I did once a month town hall meetings, and so that I think that is very important, because you cannot expect that your strategy or your message are well communicated to across the organization. Yes.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. And people sometimes say that going out and drinking with the staff, after hours, non-communication, yeah. How about that? Is that something that's been important in your leadership, or not so much?
Not really. Well, sometimes I go out for drink, but I think we talked about bias. So yes, you need to have healthy relationship with your organization, but at the same time you should be free from all this bias. And if you too close to your people, you will be subtly biased from the many people tries to convey the message in that out of office environment. So you should be cautious about it.
Mm-hmm. And in modern organizations, often we have a matrix.
Yeah.
And so you may be the functional country head, but there are individual reports who are actually reporting dotted line to you and full line to somewhere outside the country.
That is the case at TAG.
That's the same here, right?
Yes, it is.
That seems to be making leadership quite a trickier exercise than in the past, where we didn't have that. What has been your experience of some of the challenges of matrix leadership?
So, I see some risk of matrix organizations like TAG, but I see more benefit of such management style, to be honest, because the marketing and communication is increasingly complicated and complex. You may be familiar with one of the other specialties, but cannot be a specialist in all service categories that we are delivering. So naturally, you have to rely on subject matter specialists on that. So if that's the case, you have a regional specialist group, and your subordinate reports professionally to that subject matter specialist or expert, and geographically he or she reports to you. I think that is the healthy structure, and you have a better chance to provide quality service, higher quality service to your customers. So yes, I am fully aware of what you're talking about as kind of the risk as a leader, but I see more benefit of matrix organization as opposed to risk.
Something that surprised me about Japanese big companies is that the president often doesn't have that much power. That the division heads inside the organization have got tremendous power, and the president's sort of the head, but really not the leader in such
they're
a
managers,
powerful way.
as I said. Yes. Yes, they're managers. Their job is, as a manager, they just acknowledge and approve what his team is coming up with. Right, that is the role, and they hardly meet their customers and hardly involved in day-to-day operation, which is all dedicated. So they are pretty much hands-off as opposed to hands-on, which makes you a manager as opposed to leaders. If you want to be a strong leader, you really have to hands-on, and you really have to understand what's going on. Otherwise, you cannot lead and you cannot create innovations, right? So that, I think, is the fundamental differences between leaders and managers.
And also, one of the things I noticed when we used to do engagement surveys in Japan, they'd be doing them globally, and so you'd get sent to the hub, probably Hong Kong or Singapore or somewhere, and they'd have all the regional people there, and they'd be showing the global results of the engagement surveys. And invariably, APAC scores would be the lowest globally.
Yeah.
And invariably, Japan would be the lowest in APAC. What's been your experience of these sorts of very low scores for engagement, and what does it mean?
That is the my experience, to be quite honest with you, and I tried to understand where it comes from, to be honest. Couple of reasons. One is the people, in particular middle to junior peoples, sort of disappointed about slow change of the organizations, and they are not given any authorities to do something different. Very, I would say, seniority-driven organization as opposed to, meritocracy type of compensation is another reasons. And naturally, the senior you are, the more risk about you will be. So no matter what kind of ideas that you come up with, your manager said, no, let's stay with what we have done before. So there's many things and many elements that discourage your talented people, to be honest. So yes, I still believe the quality of Japanese workers are pretty high relative to the global standard, but there is many ways to discourage or disappoint these talented people. I think that is my view.
And why is it that the managers are discouraging them having a little bit of chance to have some authority or lead a project and do something new? What is the fear of the new that's driving people to suppress that?
So again, the performance evaluation is basically deduction principle as opposed to point principle. So if you take a risk and do something, and sometimes it goes well, but sometimes it doesn't go well. If it doesn't go well, your point will be deducted.
When you say your point will be deducted, what do you mean?
So, if you take a risk and do something, right, then you will gain some point. That's the point principle, right? Katen shugi in Japanese. Right, so that is the way to make yourself as a fast tracker, right? But here, you are supposed to behave like everybody else. If you do something wrong, your point will be deducted. As opposed to you do something extraordinary, then you gain the point. That's, I think, is fundamental difference. Therefore, I call it often the akubyodo. What's the akubyodo in English?
The negative example you're thinking, or
what it's called in English? I tried to understand. Yes,
Akubyodo.
Misapplied equality.
What did you call it again? Sorry.
Misapplied equality.
Akubyodo is misapplied equality.
Yes.
Okay, that's a new word for me.
Yeah.
Akubyodo. Okay.
So they tried to. So many of the Japanese organizations tried to manage the people on the same age, same generations. Mm-hmm. So you are not supposed to do something extraordinary or something different. Actually, they expect you to behave like everybody else do, right? So that is the fundamental reason. Therefore, it makes the people very conservative. So you don't have to do anything particularly unique or particularly new, right? And if you your ideas goes well, okay, you might be appreciated by the management, but by and large, the organization do not appreciate all these unpredictable behaviors, if you will. Therefore, the managers themselves and managers expect their teams to behave in the same way.
So the upside of innovation is not great, and the downside of failure is huge. So people think better to keep doing the safe route.
Yeah, exactly. People do not want to take the risk, but the younger generations are willing to take a risk, and they are also aware of risk, not taking a risk. But their senior managers, they are more conservative and they do not want to take risk. So that is the way to discourage younger people. And today, many of new graduates who joined tier 1 companies, tier 1 Japanese companies, within 3 years, good 20%, 30% of the young talents leave the companies. Why? Because they do not see, the career futures in such a traditional and conservative organization.
So what about in your case, in your company? You must have, they're all Japanese staff out there for the most part. I mean, there are not all Japanese staff, but mostly Japanese staff here. There's bound to be young people or people who've got ideas or want to try something. And yes, there's a risk of failure. So how do you approach that here?
So I always, encourage my people to take risk. And I perfectly fine for them to make a mistake. But I don't like them not to take a risk and not to challenge the new things. So I always encourage them to, go ahead and give it a try. And sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't make it, but that's fine. But status quo, standing still, is not an option. That is the kind of message that you keep delivering, I think.
And I guess the real crunch comes when they do make the mistake, because often people may say that at a sort of rhetorical level, and then they blow up when they make a mistake and get really upset. So how do you actually show the credibility of that support when they do make a mistake? How do you handle mistakes?
So when they take a risk and unfortunately it doesn't work, they come to me, and certainly we do investigate why and what's the root cause. Then we tried to share the learnings from that incident, why it didn't go as well. But that's the end of the project, and from next time on, all these the learnings from the mistake will be shared, and we will make sure that in second round we will succeed as opposed to fail. So that is what we usually do.
So there's no impact on, say, their performance assessment to get a negative mark for failing in a project or something?
So I always the warn at appraised time. I warn them that if he or she did not take any, the risk. That is something that I don't like, and I mentioned to them that you should be much more brave, and I encourage them to take a risk in the next fiscal years, as opposed to stand still and try to be conservative and do all these same thing again and again, which is not, the world is changing very quickly, so you cannot afford to stand still.
Your company has got this approach, and your competitors probably have the old style, conservative, steady as she goes, don't make any changes. So I'm imagining that if you're encouraging this innovation environment inside the company, that you will be winning against your competitors, because your people will be trying new things without fear, experimenting, learning, getting more motivated, staying with the company, and wanting to stay with the company because they know if they go somewhere else, the money might be better, but they'll have no power, or they have no chance to express themselves. Are you finding that it's helping you in that competitive environment with your competitors, and is it also helping you to retain people?
So yes, there is no such things as stable place anymore. Even if you work for one companies, which is big companies, by the way, but you never know what is going to happen. So you have to, you as a professional have to create your own the personal brand, as opposed to you rely on your company's brand. I think that is the very different mindset, and that is essential moving forward. So you and I previously talked about generalist as opposed to specialist, but you have to design your career yourself, and as opposed to you rely on your companies to design your careers. I think that is a very important element for young people's moving forward.
That idea in the West would be a very accepted standard idea, that you are responsible for your own career. You have to create your personal professional brand. You have to seek advancement inside the company. But do you see a change here yet, where people are starting to understand that, okay, I have to take responsibility, I have to build my personal brand, I can't rely on being with a company for 40 years. Do you see that's changing at all?
Not as quick as it should be, to be honest. That's my view. And some young people are inclined to think in that way, but the 30s and 40 years old, and certainly for 50s, they still rely on your company's brand, and that I think is still the case, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So that is really the point. So I keep telling youngsters in particular that you design your own careers, opposed to you expect your company to create the great career for you. Because your companies give you first mission when you join the company after school as a salesperson, maybe 5 years. Then next 5 years you will be in factory if you're working for manufacturing companies. Then next 5 years you might be go to administrative. Then next 5 years in finance. Then maybe HR, and maybe procurement, and back to sales again. So you will be the specialist of the companies, of the particular company that you work for. You know everything about the company that you work for. But from your outside view or perspective, you are nobody. You have no specialties. You are not a sales professional. You are not marketing professional. Certainly not procurement professionals. You are generalist instead. Is that the best way to create your market value? Probably not. So you should design your careers. So if you find marketing is the specialty that you want to dig in, then you should not stay in the same companies if they ask you to move from marketing to sales. You should stay in marketing and move to another companies, which you can create your value as a marketeers. That I think is the other way. I mean, as you pointed out, is very the standard way of Western mentalities. But here it is still not the case. People want to. They are so afraid of leaving the company and get out from the comfortable zone. So that I think is the. That's what I meant to say. Risk, not taking risk.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. I've asked you a number of things about leadership. Is there something I should have asked you about that I've forgotten to ask?
So a couple of things. Actually, acquiring good tier one local talent has been always a challenge for gaishike companies in Japan, right? Because the other people prefer to work for Japanese companies as opposed to gaishike companies or foreign capital companies. But given all these, the changes that we just mentioned, I think it's probably very good opportunity for gaishike companies to acquire good quality local talent, because the other people are questioning about the traditional companies, if that is the best way to develop their careers. So it is a good opportunity for non-Japanese companies to acquire good local talent, I think. So that's one thing. And also I mentioned about senior people who are kind of conservative. So your direct report may be conservative and do not want to appreciate the radical change. But one or two level below them are much more willing to try something new. So try to get direct contact with these people who may not be the best English speakers, but they still appreciate if you come to you, if you come to them. And they truly appreciate, and they are much more open to talk to you what they really think. So I think that is important attitude. And one last thing is about again I mentioned earlier, but these countries need more game changers. We need more fresh perspective. As opposed to traditional conservative managers. So we need more aliens, we need more gaijin, we need more fresh perspective, and so stay here and develop your careers in this market, please. Mm-hmm. That is your best benefit and the best benefit of your organization and also the country as a whole. That's what I believe.
So if we were going to give some advice, someone's coming to Japan or they've been in Japan a short time, and you're going to give them 3 pieces of advice,
right,
of things they should think about as a leader in Japan, what would those 3 pieces of advice be? How would you advise them?
I do not expect newcomers to behave like locals. because there is many local peoples. You don't have to be a locals. You have to be in one way an interface, right? As I mentioned earlier, but you are the game changers. So some people tried to behave like Japanese and go out for drink nominations and go to the karaoke and all this, which I don't denied, but that is not what the key thing that you have to do. Position yourself as a game changer, because that is the thing that you will have to do. That's one thing. And second thing is the be mindful that your company needs a person like yourself. So don't think Japan as one of the stepping stones for your careers. So stay here for 3 years, maximum 5 years, and go back to US or go back to England or go to another better place. Please try to commit longer term in this market and try to be a real, the leader for your organization in this market. Because, as I said earlier, we need a leader like you, and we need a leader with different perspective, unique perspective, which is very important in homogeneous societies like Japan. These are the two things probably.
Yeah, well, that's really good advice. Thank you very much. Well, we've had a really fascinating conversation today. I feel we've gone very deep on seeing how Japanese companies work, the potential they have to change what they're doing and to grow. And I'm sure that if we followed Kubo-san's advice around getting game changers employed and giving people the opportunity to grow and to experiment and to innovate, that the whole country will move forward much faster than it has done to date and will secure a place for itself in the future. So I'd just like to thank Kubo-san once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for a fascinating conversation. I appreciate
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
So that concludes today's episode on leadership for Japan's top business interviews. I look forward to joining you for our next show.